I'm going to talk a little bit specifically about New Zealand context, with a lot of what I say will very much overlap with what Guy has said, and any comments from him, or I might ask the odd question, but hopefully I think the two will overlap pretty well. But I'm just going to start with a very simple exercise in political arithmetic, and that is that now New Zealand could have a 33% income tax and a public equity dividend of $175 per week. And the cost of that would be roughly the cost of the tax package in the Stephen Joyce budget. Okay. Now, and one reason it isn't particularly expensive is that we already have it for everybody in New Zealand earning $70,000 a year or more. If you're in that case, you just do the same, multiply your earnings by 0.67 and then add 9,000, which is the annual amount, $175 a week, and that's what your net income is. Right. Now, we could have more with a higher tax rate. So if the tax rate went up to 35% instead of 33%, that would be an extra $25 a week. So you could have 35% and $200 a week. But at present, nobody would pay any more taxes if you stuck to the 33. Okay, now the public dividend represents two particularly important concepts. The first is a public property right. That is what you were talking about, public property rights. We hear much about private property rights, but that is simply one part of the wider scheme of property rights. It's a public property right. Okay. The second one is that it represents economic democracy. Now, the basic slogan for democracy, one person, one vote. Okay, so economic democracy, one person, one public equity dividend. Okay, rich or poor, one each. Okay, we have a dichotomy, and I think we're having a little debate later on about the dichotomy of universal versus targeted. And we've been kind of trained a little bit to think that these are two concepts that don't mix. You either have universal benefits or you have targeted benefits. One or the other. New Zealand became well famous in the late 1930s for introducing universal benefits into its mix. It didn't abandon targeted benefits, it didn't abandon means testing benefits, but it introduced firstly the universal superannuation, then the various benefits around healthcare and education, and then we had the family's benefit, the mother's benefit that came in 1946. But it was always a mix of universal benefits as appropriate and targeted benefits. And this reflects the two basic principles of equity. Horizontal equity, which is treating equals equally, and vertical equity, which is treating unequals unequally. Now, the first is the basis of universal provision. The second is that of targeted provision. And they're both necessary because in so many ways we're equals. We're equals as citizens, as economic citizens. But we also have differences. We have different needs in different stages in our lives. So we need a system, in my view, that represents both principles, not playing one principle against the other. Okay. So, yeah. Okay, now the issue, one of the reasons why the whole debates around tax and that kind of went astray in the 1980s because it was seen generally that tax policy had to be based on what it did for labour supply. If people worked more, that was seen as great for the economy. And when I say work more, I mean laboured more in this context. And so we went to various tax systems that were seen, the criteria of whether they were efficient or not was whether people worked more as a result of them. And this created this very neoliberal approach to public finance that we're really trying to escape from. But a universal, I'm going to say a public equity dividend, that's the term I'm wanting to use for this more broad brush concept. It is work enabling, not work disabling. So the rhetoric, what you hear is that, people will stop working. But it enables people to work because it doesn't penalise you. And here I'm talking about paid work. It doesn't penalise you because you get some kind of job, a precarious job, a part-time job. You don't give up your public equity dividend, your basic income, for taking. And then you don't have to reapply for some kind of ghastly targeted benefit once that short-term contract, that casual work, runs out. So it is labour enabling, but it's also work enabling in the wider sense, because it enables people to do mixes of work that work for them and their communities. So it is pro-work in every sense of the word work. But having said that, if you have a public equity dividend of $175 a week, which is a property right, and you have a property that's not very expensive, and you are able to live a low-impact lifestyle on $175 a week, that's great for the planet. It's not a problem, it's helpful. Okay. So we have forms of structural unemployment then that exist in New Zealand and most of the Western world because we have a benefit system that while people are exhorted to work, but actual incentives built into the system prevent them from doing so. I think many of us saw the film I, Daniel Blake, and we saw exactly in that movie, the British movie, how people who wanted very much to be employed but were just simply unable to by the rules of the system as they were facing. And it was driving people crazy. Okay, and then just got one or two other short comments just around the history in New Zealand. Now, Guy, you're well aware from what I've heard about our history in the 1930s. Now, in the 1930s, we managed to introduce a number of very important universal benefits that were significant in the world history of social security. But it was a lucky thing. Not a lot of us, people think Michael Joseph Savage, the Prime Minister, is the man of the 20th century in New Zealand. And he was, because he managed to snatch victory from defeat from a party that was trying to snatch defeat from victory. They had promised universal benefits at the end of the Great Depression. They got to power in 1935, and then most of the party did everything they could to try and move to a different direction. But in the end, it was the things that resonated not with the Labour Party but with the public, with the universal component. And, with a bit of help from a few public servants, so on, a few accountants, they got it back, and they got the universal benefits in place. And when it started, it came in under budget. The cost involved was about 80% of what almost everybody had budgeted for. It came in well under budget. So the politics of what was happening then is one of the great untold stories. It's an important story for us, not just what happened, but how it nearly didn't happen. Okay, and the other thing, just to sort of finish on this line, is that what Guy is saying is that social dividend, public equity dividend, that's the term I like, is capital income. It is not labour income. It is income from what we own, not from what we do. so a number of journalists who talk about the concept, talk about universal wage and universal salary and things like that, and these are all labourist expressions, which I just find quite annoying. We need to use words like dividend and make it clear that as a greater share of total income is capital income and a smaller share is labour income, that ordinary people need a bigger share of capital income. And so much of it is public equity. It is our shared ownership of much of the world's productive resources, not just the individual ownership by individual capitalists. Okay, and in that line, I just want to mention the particular book. So a book written by Jane Gleeson White, and she's an Australian, and she's basically an accountant, but she's an accountant historian. She's a green accountant. And in 2014, the book was called Six Capitals. Okay, and she identified six capitals, and I'm going to list them: natural, financial, manufactured, human, intellectual, socio-cultural. Now these are the capitals these are the springs, the puna of our wealth. These capitals. Now 3 of these are inherently public. Natural, intellectual, and socio-cultural. So intellectual is basically knowledge and technology. For example, financial capital has a public component. The banking system is an institution. Even if the banks are private, the banking system's an institution, and the Reserve Bank that makes it all work is public. Okay. Manufactured capital, one of the ones that's partly private, includes all our physical infrastructure. And the other private one, human capital, includes massive public investment in education so that people can earn high salaries as doctors and lawyers and so on. Okay. So these are the basis of the public property right of the capitals that we own, and as owners of capital, we have the entitlement to a public equity dividend. So that's what I wanted to say. I'm interested if Guy has anything that because it resonates to me with much of what you said.
Thanks.